Okay. Hello, everyone. This is Between Two Teachers, and welcome to this episode here on Friday, March the 29th. And we have lots of news for you, a lot of local things happening. We might just be all over the place because I would like to say a lot of good news, but it's good that we're talking about it. We're bringing these things up. We'll continue to talk about them and we push forward. So that's the good news. And my name is Consuelo Lara.
My name is Madeline Cronenberg. And as always, I will begin with our recognitions. And the first one is the labor and body recognition. I acknowledge that the burden of environmental exploitation and systemic injustice falls upon the labor of Black and brown bodies in the building of this country and its institutions. I remember the Black and brown people who were born and died working this land against their will for generations. I also acknowledge the continued contribution of the labor of survivors over the centuries to today of all immigrant labor, including voluntary, involuntary, trafficked, forced, and undocumented peoples in the building of what we refer to as these United States. And that was written by Dr. Rochelle Rogers Ard, who wrote that for the West Contra Costa School Board and for their organizational meetings. So we thank Dr. Rogers Ard, and then we add to it our land acknowledgement. We pause to acknowledge that we've gathered on the ancestral territory of Hui Chin, part of the unceded land of the Chochenyo and Karken speaking Muwekma Ohlone people. We remember their continued contributions and connection to this region and give thanks to them for allowing us to live, work, learn, and pray on their traditional homeland, and offer our respect to their elders and all Ohlone people of the past and present. And we continue to join the Ohlone people in advocating for justice for the Muwekma Ohlone people to become part of the recognized tribes by our federal government so that they can get the benefits of being a recognized tribe. And also we continue to advocate that you, whoever you are who is watching us today, make sure you understand the history of the Native peoples and how that history is now taught in our schools, which is different than it has been in the past. And you can see that curriculum in a number of places, but in particular, you can find it on the East Bay East Bay Regional Park website. And you just have to search for Ohlone curriculum and it will pop up and you will find it there. But you can also find it on the Contra Costa County Office of Education website.
Yes, there is a link to land acknowledgements under About CCOE, and it will come down and you can get a lot of background information. I think it would be really important for our county to add the labor acknowledgement as well, and also have a link to some information on that. So I'm gonna pass that on, that I think that would be a good thing for us to do.
I think that's a great idea. And it's also done by the county. That there's also a labor acknowledgement that exists. Our county has an Office of Racial and Social Justice. They have the labor acknowledgement.
Yes.
So I think it needs to be expanded to the rest of all of the county offices.
Yeah. And the support of the tribes is really important. Things are coming up like, burial grounds and the various, but the federal government will say, well, it has to be a registered, acknowledged tribal nation. So that's why supporting these and making sure that they are able to have their voice heard and have some input on these situations that are coming up. So there's a lot of reasons to support this.
Exactly. And it's the kind of thing that what it does is it centers who we are. So we don't have the the attitude of taking it for granted that we've had for so many years. That's why it's important to me. I mean, I look at both of these. It really does center your work. So you rethink what has been taken for granted for so long. So that's why we do it. That's why we do it. Okay, and we also need to ask you to continue to join us, to sign up if you're watching us on YouTube, to like us and ring the bell so that you can find out when we publish, and join our little tribe here at Between Two Teachers. In addition, we're going to start this week with some national news. There are two parts of the country I want to talk about that have been had activity, particular activity in education. And the first one is led by Mr. Miles, Mike Miles. Mike Miles is the head of the Houston Independent School District, and he is basically the leader of that district, and was brought in by Governor Abbott to take it over. Mr. Miles has a background of being a charter school network leader, founder and leader, and he is bringing his tools from that experience into the city of Houston. And basically what he's doing is, this is something we've seen before many, many times, and it's not gonna go away. As people look for what does accountability look like, the easiest way to measure it is if you have a test and then you teach to the test, and there you have it. Then you have your accountability, right? And that is apparently what Mr. Miles is doing. And he's doing it in how he's evaluating and keeping his principals. And he's doing it in how he's evaluating and paying his teachers. So he has a very long document that explains his plan, and it's very detailed, but it comes down to what I just said. Essentially, that is what's happening, and so that you're at risk if you don't have the test numbers that he wants you to have. And the only way you really get those test numbers is if you don't do anything but teach to the test.
Yeah, exactly. It's very much a business model.
Yeah.
The more you produce, the more money you get, the more reward you get. If you don't produce, we're going to get rid of you. So the production is that the students have to perform a certain thing on the test. And it doesn't matter their background. They all have to maintain a certain level. Otherwise, they're failures. So it's a real weeding out of, who's going to be successful and who won't be. So it's just, it's not the teaching of the whole child, a human being here.
No.
We're nurturing.
No.
And it's just.
No, there's no recognition. There's no recognition of nurturing at all. This is flat out, we are going to teach to the test, and that we're going to be measured by this number. You have to hit this number, or you're not going to get the same salary that somebody else who hits the number can get. And this is where you wind up with such disparity. So you have teachers who will be working with a group of children who have very different backgrounds. Some children from backgrounds that are very affluent and have had all kinds of exposures because they have an affluent background will be able to master this test without much difficulty. Other children will not. And those teachers will be paid differently. They'll be paid by the score that the kids got on the test. That is Mr. Miles' program for Houston.
Yeah.
So we'll hear more about this. The people in Houston, certainly Houston is not a union state. Houston has all sorts of issues, or it's operating the way it's operating. But he has this as a very large district. Houston is one of the largest districts in the country, so he has a tremendous amount of power, and he's not doing anything that you couldn't have predicted he would do, because this is exactly what he did in the charter network that he operated before he arrived in his position in Houston. So we'll watch it. We'll watch and see what happens and continue to update you on the success that the children in Houston are having. The children in New York are also going through something with their leader. And in their case, it's a man, it's Mr. Banks. In New York, schools are led by the mayor. It's a mayoral controlled area. And the mayor appointed Mr. Banks, Chancellor David Banks. And so in New York, it's the biggest system, many schools, and more than one superintendent. Because if you were looking at the number of neighborhoods and children in New York, there would be, multiple districts the size of what a district what we would call in other states. And the main thing that's happening there, which is interesting, is they're having a shakeup. And their shakeup is to eliminate the Department of Teaching and Learning.
Which would be curriculum and instruction in California. So
exactly.
we don't care about teaching and learning.
Now we're gonna move that around. So we're not gonna look at it and call it out individually, which is of course exactly really what's happening in Houston. They're not doing it either. They're basically giving you a copy. They give the teacher a copy of the test. Here, teach this.
Teach this. Yeah.
That's it. That's it. This is not about critical, learning how to be a critical thinker, learning how to adjust to pressure and anxieties and all of the social emotional learning. None of that's on the test.
No.
Right. So that's not what we're interested in. And apparently that's the same thing here, because what we have are these ideas around accountability and this way they can say, well, look, we raised the test scores.
Yeah. They want to rely on one number, instead of, there's just multiple measures. I remember when we would assess kids, in school, we didn't rely on one thing. There were multiple measures and we looked at it all together, the total child, the whole, in terms of what they could do. So this is just
it's all, it all needs to be watched. It's really not very new. I will say this, many years ago when I was in high school, I was in New York State. New York State had the Regents test. I had in my, two of the classes I took in high school did not have textbooks. We had no textbook. And I was in a Catholic parochial high school, all girls high school. You had to take a test to get into. But once you got there and you got into these classes, the actual coursework, the only thing we had in that class was a copy of the test book. New York State Regents, you could see the past years of New York State Regents tests in this book. And that was what you had to learn. And you had to memorize it. This was it. And I was taught by sisters, the Dominican sisters, and the Dominican sisters said, our job is the accountability. And so this is a long time ago. So it's nothing new here. Their job was to teach to the test. And that's what they did. That's what they did. And I am sure in their case that there wasn't anybody, there was no curriculum council in the convent. They were just handed, and here's what you're going to do.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But I see this all the time. It just truly reminds me of exactly that experience, because you don't need anything else if you're only teaching to the test.
Yeah.
So there's that. So we'll watch what the city is doing. And in New York City, it's they have a literacy advisory council. I don't know what they're going to say about the changes that have been made, but there are big changes that they're seeing in how the city is running their department. In California, closer to home, one thing we wanted to talk about before I get to labor, I'll talk about the news of a person who has announced that he is running for superintendent of schools. We, of course, have Mr. Thurmond, Tony Thurmond, who is our superintendent of schools now. Mr. Thurmond has declared that he is going to be running for governor. right? This is years away, but nonetheless, it's, he's declared that. That's publicly known. And his last opponent for that, for his seat as superintendent of schools, Lance Christensen, he has announced that he will be seeking the superintendent of schools position again in a couple of years when it's up. So we haven't seen the last of Mr. Christensen. He was not remotely successful last time.
And he's backed financially, right, by probably the charter.
Right, he's the right wing. He's right wing.
And others, yeah.
Right.
MAGA PACs. Sure.
Yes, oh, definitely. To the extent that they will think that he might be successful.
Yeah.
So that's it. So he is still very much a player. We'll be seeing him.
Okay.
And then I just wanted to talk a little bit about labor.
Yes.
And the coalition, right? So we've talked about that here before. So there has been progress. Alameda was not in the coalition, but Antioch is. But Alameda also was at an impasse. They've settled, and Alameda and Antioch both settled for a 7% retro.
Good.
Orinda settled for a 6% retro. Martinez has not settled.
Yeah.
Oh. I'm going to stop this meeting.